Hello everyone, this is Carmen Sanchez from the Office of Special Education Programs, and this is one of our quarterly calls with parent centers on topics that are of interest to you. Let me go on to the agenda. Let's see now. I'm trying to, there we go. So our agenda today consists mostly of some updates that we wanted you all to have from us, from OSEP, and then most of the time will be spent with Debra Jennings and Jessica Wilson from the Center for Parent Information and Resources to talk about the database of survey questions and also the results of our data collection efforts that you all participated in. So before I get to my part, the OSEP updates, I want to mention some things in the pod. As you heard, we have already started recording this, so the recording will be available on the CIPRA website in a few days. In addition to that, you see in the chat space a link to the transcript. The Federal Relay Service is transcribing this as we speak, and you can, if you need that, please follow the link for a transcript at Federal Relay Service. In the pods, you should also see something called a handouts pod. If you open that, there's a little plus sign right before the handouts. You'll see the PowerPoint for this presentation is there for you to download. And in addition, when Jessica refers to the database of survey questions, it's a PDF of the instructions for how to use the database. So all those can be found in that handout pod. So please take advantage of that if you'd like that. So OSEP updates. I know that a lot of you have a lot of questions in terms of what's happening given the change in administration, and we don't have necessarily a lot of information on that right now. We will provide you information as we have it. But what we do have is just some updates for you to keep in mind. As you know, your annual performance reports are due on May 5th. That's Friday, May 5th. All of you, thank you very much for submitting your shells of what your APRs should look like. The project officers are working very furiously in order to read those shells and get back to you, we hope, by the end of this month and early April at the latest, so that you know that you can use those shells as is or with some minor modification in order to submit your reports. Or if you need more modifications, you'll have some time to do that before you submit your reports on May 5th. So if you have any questions about your APR or about your shell, please contact your project officer directly and ask him or her about that. I also want to draw your attention to the symposia series. We had one symposium already in February having to do with significant disproportionality. The second one in the series is going to be happening next Wednesday, March 22nd. Actually, it's Thursday, March 22nd. No, Wednesday, March 22nd. And the topic will be creating safe, supportive learning environments for children with disabilities. You can register at osepideas@work.org, and that is a live link. So if you download the PowerPoint for this, you can follow the link and register for that webinar or that symposium. I strongly encourage you to do that. It's about 2 hours. There's some pre-work ahead of time, and there'll be some other information there. As you also know, the IdeaEdgov website experienced some difficulties. It's up and running now. If you put into your browser idea.ed.gov, no www, that's often what confuses folks. But if you go to idea.ed.gov, the site is up and running and looks very much like the site looked. It has been reconstructed on a much more stable server, but it's up and running. However, we are interested in seeing what we can do in order to improve the site and make it more timely. Many of the materials contained at idea.ed.gov now date back to 2006, so some of them are actually over a decade old. And we're thinking through how we want to revise the site to make it more useful. If you go to that link to an OSER's blog, that will give you an opportunity to provide comment in terms of what you like about the site, what you would like to see change, what other materials you would like on there. So please feel free to go to that blog and comment directly on your ideas about how to improve the IdeaEdgov website. To remind you, Leadership Conference is coming up July 17th to the 19th. Registration will be at osepideas.work.org. It's not up and running quite yet, I don't think, the registration, but you will look out for information about that. It's at the Crystal Gateway Marriott Hotel in Arlington, Virginia. Very soon also, we hope within the next week or two, there will be a call for breakout session topics. We strongly encourage you to think through what you would like to have in those breakout sessions and you to propose a breakout session that will speak to the needs of the families you serve and also to the other parent centers. So please be on the lookout for the call for breakout sessions. We'll make sure that that gets out to all the regional parent technical assistance centers as well as the SIPR so that you will have an opportunity to propose a breakout session that will meet your needs. And with that, that is what we have in terms of updates from OSEP. I'm going to turn it over right now to Debra to talk about the results of the parent-centered data collection. Please feel free, if you have questions as to what I discussed, please put them in the question pod or in the chat pod, and we will try to get to those questions later. But Debra has a lot of information to share about the parent-centered data collection, and I think that will take up most of our webinar. So Debra, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Carmen. And yes, we do have a lot of information to share with you today. I appreciate all of you joining us today, and am looking forward to sharing with you what our results look like for the most recent data collection. So what we've done is very similar to last year in terms of looking at the work that you reported in your data collection. As you know, the information was due in, at the end of the first week in November, and I want to really let you guys know how much I appreciate folks for getting that data in early as well as on time. It really helps because once all of the data comes in, we do have to do some pretty complicated analysis to put together this report. And so the sooner the data is in, the more quickly we can get down to that part of the work. So overall, in terms of contacts for individual assistance and also for parent-centered training activities, we are just under 1 million this year. Last year we were just over 1 million, but so we're really pretty much in that same range in terms of the numbers of contacts. And let's look a little bit deeper into what's included in those numbers. First of all, we are increasing the percentage of our contacts of our clients, consumers, partners, participants in the area of students. Last year we reported just 2%, and so we have seen a reasonably large increase in terms of the percentage of students that we are serving, where we're now at 3.2%. The professionals and parents slices of the pie, those are pretty steady, with parents at just over 66% and professionals at right around 32%. We are very consistent from year to year in terms of our work with parents, but also with professionals who are impacting our children. When we look at trainings, we had just over 326,000 training contacts, and of those training contacts, 62% were in person, and the other 38% were virtual contacts. And when we're talking about virtual participation, that's where we're looking at people who participate in our trainings via webinars, teleconferences, online modules, etc. So again, those pieces of the pie are fairly steady from last year, with a slight increase in terms of the percentage of in-person participants, which is I think it says something about how people really do appreciate that face-to-face contact. They like the virtual piece, it's convenient, but they really do like and need that face-to-face contact and that networking with others who share their interests and their concerns. When we look at the trainings, this gives you a little bit more detail in terms of parents' participation in in-person trainings as well as virtual trainings. We had just over 200,000 parent contacts in the area of training, and that's really very consistent with our numbers from last year. With professionals, we had really a significant increase in professionals' participation in terms of the in-person trainings, where last year it was just under 60,000, now we're over 70,000. And then with students, as I mentioned before, we had really a huge jump in terms of the numbers of student participants. Last year we were just under 15,000, and now we've reached over 20,000 in terms of our student contacts. So we're really pushing through and trying to reach students and get students engaged in those trainings so that they can be better advocates for themselves and along with their families. When we look at individual assistance, we do see the percentages that were where the assistance occurred via email, which was actually at 45%. And at 45% this year, email individual assistance has outpaced telephone individual assistance, and it's slightly less than if you combine the telephone and meetings, which are those live, that live individual assistance activities. There is some work that's being done in order to help guide us in terms of how we work with families using email and other kinds of virtual contact that will be coming to us through the work that's being done under a supplement with the regional parent technical assistance centers. We just really want to make sure that we're all doing this in a way that is going to not only protect the interests of our parent centers and staff, but also to make sure that what we're doing is effective and protect the interests of families. Individual assistance, you can see here the breakdown of the numbers for phones, which for parents was just under 200,000, whereas with professionals we were at 36,800, just over, and we also have a lot of connections with students. One of the areas where we did see a big jump in terms of email assistance was in terms of the students number. And I guess we know that students who are those digital natives, that's the way that they communicate. And so we can see when looking at the numbers compared to last year that there was a significant increase from just over 2,000 last year to over 2,600 this year. In terms of email for parents, we were at 168,371, and for professionals, we were at 113,894. And that number for professionals, interestingly, is a pretty large dip of about 24,000 there. So there is less email contact with professionals and others, where the increases were primarily with parents and significantly with students. When we look across disability categories, we see that autism and then undisclosed are the primary categories that are the greatest percentage of the categories that we're serving, with autism at 22% and undisclosed at 21.8%, just under 22%. Next would be other health impaired at 10.8%, and then specific learning disability at 9.4%. And then following would be emotional disturbance at 6.5%, and intellectual disability at 6%. We also have our numbers for speech language impairment at 5.3%, developmental delay at 4.9%, multiple disabilities at 4.2%, and then the other categories totaled up to about 4%. We have made, I think we've made a lot of progress in terms of the number of parent centers this year who were able to that specific data. Last year, we did have a number of centers who were not able to share at that point the demographics around disability or race, ethnicity, or language. So our numbers, it's hard for us to compare the demographics from year to year because we have so many more centers who now have their system set up so that they can report that information. Next year will be sort of the year that we see if there are any trends. In terms of age groups, our largest group is in that school age is 6 to 11 at 39.5%. And then we have ages 12 to 14 and ages 15 through graduation or age out, both are at 18.1%. We have ages 3 to 5 at 13.3%. And then the percentage for birth to 3 is just under 6% at 5.9%. And then high school graduates who have, or those who have aged out of the IDEA system are at 5.3%. So those, it really demonstrates that we are serving age groups from birth through 26. But of course, that school age population in those grades of kindergarten through early middle school, that's where we're seeing the most demand for our time and our services. In terms of languages, we collected information for around individual assistance by language and also training contacts by language. And those numbers are pretty close in terms of comparisons, with 77% of the individual assistance being provided in English and 79% of training being provided in English. And then for Spanish, we had 18% for individual assistance and 17% for training contacts. And then we had about 5% other for individual assistance and 4% for training contacts. And last year, after we had completed the data collection, several of you said, well, what are some other languages that parent centers are using in terms of serving families? And so this year we did collect that data. And as you'll see, we have parent centers who are providing training and individual assistance in more than 40 languages in addition to English and Spanish. And so we've included in our slide a list of those 40 languages. And there are some that many of us are familiar with, but there are many that are particular to various regions in Asia, in the Pacific, etc. And so we do see that there is such a wonderful diversity of languages that where parent centers are reaching and serving families. And this is the expertise that we really want to make sure that we're sharing across the system. So now this is also kind of a plug for you to join the Who Knows What, so you can see if there's a particular language you're looking for of this list, who in our parent center network may have resources or information in some of these 40 languages. In terms of race, our numbers are 51.6% of the children served are identified as white or Caucasian, and then 23.4% it was recorded as being undisclosed race. And that is where either a family elected to not disclose the race, or that information was not collected by the parent center. I do say that, again, I would say that compared to last year, significantly more parent centers are collecting this information, and I think that we'll see these numbers in terms of undisclosed, we'll start to see those numbers reducing. African American children were at 15.9%, Asian at 4.7%, those reporting 2 or more races were at 2.8%, and the Native American, Alaska Native population is at 1.3% of our individual assistance and training context. In terms of how we're serving Hispanic and Latino families, we are at 27.8% of our contacts were with Latino families, and 72.2% with non-Latino families. There were also about 70,000 contacts that did not disclose an ethnicity. And then last but definitely not least would be our dissemination. And our dissemination numbers are just really exploding. Newsletters, over 9.5 million newsletters last year. Website page views, we're looking at almost 11.7 million. Social media reach was at just under 14 million. And then we're also, still doing what's really important for many of our families is attending poster sessions and resource fairs and disseminating materials. And we disseminated materials over 2 million through exhibits and poster sessions. We also reported holding 716 media events during that last year. And then meetings, so we look at meetings in terms of the meetings that are directly for the support of students, and then we'll also look at the meetings that are related to systems change. In terms of the meetings, we are at, for IFSP, IEP, and 504 meetings, parent centers attended 9,846 meetings. Attended 637 facilitated IEP meetings. Due process hearings, 121. Manifestation determination hearings, 447. Mediations, 386. 293 suspension and expulsion hearings, and 367 resolution sessions. And those, the numbers of meetings, particularly in those last 4 categories, those numbers tend to, they're continuing to creep up in terms of manifestation determinations, mediations, and hearings for suspensions and expulsions, and also for resolution sessions as well. Last year, we started collecting information on our participation in systems change meetings, and it's really excellent to see how many of us are doing that systems change advocacy that will ultimately impact and hopefully improve the systems that where we're serving children and families. Over 1,000 systems change meetings at the national or federal level. Almost 4,000 meetings were held. We had participants at the state level, and almost 5,000 systems change meetings at the local level. Often when we are, in terms of our Parent Technical Assistance Center network, when we're meeting with state leaders and meeting with other national organizations, for us to share these numbers with those partners and collaborators is really, they are very, very impressed, because we as parent centers have an excellent reputation for that one-on-one working with families, training, and so forth, but many don't really appreciate so much of the work that we do related to being partners and also critical friends to help to improve the systems of education and early intervention and health and mental health and other systems that are impacting our children. And so, these numbers are always impressive to advocates and government agency partners. So that's the data collection in terms of our numbers, the numbers that are being counted. And then part two of the data collection is about what do parents say about parent centers. That's those program measure surveys where each of you was assigned a certain number of surveys from a random list to contact parents that you had served and just find out what are parents saying about parent centers. So here's what they said about information meeting their needs. Almost 93% of parents either strongly agreed or agreed that the information and support that you provided met their needs. There were just the strongly disagreed numbers, and the disagree numbers were very, very small. As you can see, that there is a high level of satisfaction with the information that parents are receiving. Also, what was really great is to see how many parents were able to understand the information that they received. So, often parents will receive information and it'll meet their needs, but we want to make sure that they understand it. And 95.5% of parents strongly agreed or agreed that they were able to understand the information that they received. Both of these numbers are really huge testaments to the importance of what we do and how we work with families. Also, the information helps you learn more about how to meet your child's needs. 91.5% of parents strongly agreed or agreed that the information helped them to know how to meet the needs of their child. And 93.6% stated that information that they received was useful and that they were able to take the information that was provided and actually use it to help to make a difference for their children and help to get their children's needs met. The next one is about how parents feel in terms of how prepared were they based on the information that they received. And parents indicated that 90.8% strongly agreed or agreed that the information prepared them for those meetings, for those those IEP meetings, those IFSP meetings, those conversations about discipline, that they felt like they were really prepared. And then in the last area, 83.3% of parents strongly agreed or agreed that they feel confident in their ability to work with their child's school or with service providers to meet their child's needs. And that is again, about how the information that they received, how useful it is, how they're able to understand it, and then how they're able to actually be prepared to use it. Then the confidence comes in how they feel like they are received or going to be received by their school and what those outcomes are. Often those pieces are the pieces that we as parent centers can't necessarily control, but to know that 83.3% of parents are going in and feeling that kind of confidence, I said, again, says a lot about how well we are doing our work. And then in terms of recommending, 93.1% of parents that were surveyed said yes, that they would recommend the parent center to their friends or family. 4.5% said maybe. I'm not sure where the maybes come from. And then there was 2.5% that said no, that they would not recommend the parent center to their friends or families. And those numbers are very similar to last year's numbers as well. So with that, I think we all should give ourselves a huge round of applause. I think we have really continued to do a phenomenal job, and not often in some contexts and some conditions that are not always that supportive. And you know, that despite everything, that we as parent centers are still, you know, we're still there, we're still doing the work, and really still stepping up for families, and families are still being able to use what we do and to be able to help to change the services and systems for their kids.
So Debra,
Carmen, should I take questions now? Okay. Mm-hmm.
Debra, this is Carmen. I don't see any, well, there's one question in the question pod, but I also just wanted to make a comment about some of these numbers. I know it was very difficult when we went to this system, especially around the surveying of parents, that, you know, centers had to figure out a way of doing an unduplicated count, and we have to go through this process of having them send that unduplicated count to the SIPR, and then you will send them back as to which parents they need to get in contact with. And even though in many cases it means calling fewer parents that are reported to you all in order to come up with the numbers, I think seeing these numbers consistently now 2 years, and we're hoping consistently over the next following years, is a really good sign, because this is a much more scientifically accurate way of getting the sampling of the parents and having the sense of that's, you know, where the numbers actually lie in terms of parental satisfaction. So, you know, I'm very encouraged by the numbers, and again, I think everybody has done an incredibly good job of within their resources, within what they can do, being responsive, getting in their unduplicated counts in time, getting the actual surveys done and back to you in time, so that we have this kind of data that's starting to look better and has a consistency from year to year, and has a kind of reliability that's what we're looking for. So I couldn't agree more in terms of the huge round of applause. The one question we have related to this is that it does look like approximately the written assistance is now more than 50% of the individual assistance, and that is what the data does seem to suggest, right? Debra?
In terms of letter, if you put together the letters and the email, yes, we're getting past 50%. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so we're going to have you all are going to hear much more information about the supplements and about the uses of email and written technical assistance, and how that can be used in a way that, as Debra mentioned, is both meets the needs of the families and also is a good use from the parent-centered perspective of those forms of communication. So that's a supplement that's being worked on, and you'll get a lot more information about you know, guidance and policies and procedures around that kind of written individual TA. Okay, that's the only real question I see in the question pod right now.
Okay. Okay, now we're going to turn it over to Jessica Wilson, and she's going to introduce you to this really exciting Parent Center Survey Item Bank. I've been playing in it, and it is really, really fun. But then I'm a nerd. So Jessica, are you ready? Take it away.
I am, but somebody keeps changing the slides. I don't have control of the screen yet. Could we go back to the previous slides?
You should have control now.
Okay. Okay, is it following? I just can't reach, okay, there we go. So the toolbar was in the way. All right, so hi everybody, and thank you for staying on for me. This is the OSEP Parent Center Survey Item Bank, you'll also hear it referred to as the Data Bank of Survey Items or the Survey Item Database, but they all work the same way. And it's a really great site. This was in development before I came on, and once I saw it, I said, wow, this is really great. I could have used this when I was a teacher. And this is the link to ParentCenterSurveyHub.org, and what it is there are approximately 150 questions that parent centers can use to evaluate their own activities through surveys. So it's a collection of survey items, and what happened was it was done in collaboration with the parent center colleagues, and OSEP revised and approved these questions. So the whole collection of item banks is vetted and edited, and they're ready to use. The nice part about it, as we'll see as I go through, is that they're ready to use, or they can also be edited to suit your own purposes. And so if I just click here, one thing to keep in mind is that this is not going to be a static thing. It's going to evolve and change as we are able to reflect the changing needs of parent centers. One of the examples would be translations into other languages. We saw about 46 languages being represented. I would love to challenge OSEP to translate all this 150 plus questions into 46 different languages, but maybe we'll stick with a couple. So it will be changing, but basically the way that you can navigate it once you go to that site is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Jessica, this is Carmen. I wanted to give a little bit of background before we get into the actual what's actually in the data bank survey. A little bit, if you could go back one more slide.
One more.
A little bit about, yeah.
Whoops.
And now forward.
Sorry.
That's okay. So there were quite a few people from the parent centers who essentially submitted the survey, kinds of surveys that they've been using for different reasons. And when we worked with the Center to Improve Project Performance, which is an OSEP-funded contract, and we worked with Elaine Carlson and Andy Agostino from the Center to Improve Project Performance. And there was a work group of parent center staff, and I'm just going to name them really quickly. Some are actually no longer working in the parent centers. They were Tiffany Cortez, Juno Duenas, Liz Healy, Curtis Jones, Tracy Kalo, Rich LaBelle, Candia Nicholas, Elaine Roberts, Carissa Rupp, and Josie Thomas. So they worked with Center to Improve Project Performance. They submitted their own survey questions that they've been using. The Center to Improve Project Performance, when there were duplicate questions, they sort of got rid of the duplicate questions, and they sort of checked them out for some sort of consistency and whether or not that they were going to be useful. And that's how we came up with this data bank. And as you mentioned, we don't necessarily think it's going to be a static thing. We think it will grow over time. But that's a little bit of a background as to how this came to be.
Cool. Thank you. So the way that you can use this bank is basically you're going to be creating surveys, and the organization for the searches is by topic, respondent, or mode, or a combination of the three. So as you can see by the drop-downs, these are the different kinds of data, the kinds of participants, or the mode in which you're going to be collecting. And you can do a mix and match to help hone down exactly what you're trying to create. So it's very versatile, which is helpful, I think. All right. And what happens is, I don't have time to give you a demo of when you do a search, but what happens is once you go through all of these and it gives you your options for the different questions based on the criteria you enter. You can print them, you can download them. They'll come out as an RTF file, which is a generic file that allows you to put it into any word processing program if you're using Mac or PC. It also allows you to throw it into other platforms such as, Excel or some online survey programs. And you can edit the items and personalize them to your center, and I'll just give you a quick hint in a couple slides about how to do that. You might just add them to existing surveys, and there are plenty of online survey generator programs. Some of them are listed here that you can also take these items and input them there and have the online generator come on. So that's there are a lot of options. It's very versatile. And one of the nice things is that when you do get some hits, some of the questions will say name of the parent center. If you enter name of the parent center in where it's highlighted, it will automatically change the name. Oh, it didn't show you. Why didn't it show you? Okay, well, when you download the instructions, it'll show you that the name automatically goes into any of those questions. You also have the option with pre and post questions to take out. You can use them for before you give an activity and get where people are right now at this moment. You can add in the different wording for a pre-activity, and then of course you can add in wording for a post-activity. So anytime you see a pre-post in a question, it means that you can customize it to the timing of what you're doing. And excuse me. And so here is an example of the pre and post as it would show up at the top, and then down at the bottom you can see that before the activity you could write at this moment, and your survey taker could answer the question before your activity. After this training, have the answers changed. So it's very versatile. And for focus groups, there are closed and open-end items. Closed items are where they give you the answer and you have to choose between a range of options. It could either be yes or no, or somewhat, definitely, not really. And open-ended allows for more personal feedback in which they would have to actually write in their answers. And it could be short answers or longer depending on what you're asking for. How do you think you'll use the training? What did you most enjoy? And a good mix of those is available as well. So the link to the survey center data bank, or the survey item database, or however you hear it referred to, is all available at the links. The user guide is provided in the handouts as well. So anytime you have questions, you refer to that, or you can always contact us. And I believe that that is the end of the slides, Carmen.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for going through that. As she said, you will see the PDF of the instructions on how to use the survey data bank in the handout pod, which is to the right on your screen for this webinar. So you can refer to that. You can follow the links if you download this actual presentation to the actual survey data items. The SIPR will be developing a protocol for when these items will be updated and other things added to it, and so be on the lookout for information. If you have some survey questions that you use in your center that you're particularly proud of or you think have been particularly useful to you, watch out for information from the SIPR as to how you might be able to submit that so that we can continue to grow the item banks of survey questions. But they provide a really good broad range of questions for you to look at and for you to use so that you don't feel like you're reinventing the wheel. Many of the people who participated in our group putting this together, they were thrilled to see other questions from their colleagues. So this provides a really quick way of sharing those other kinds of questions that your colleagues in the data center have done. I don't see any questions. This is everybody's either you were.
We answered all their questions.
Clear. Yeah. or they don't have questions until they start exploring the database. Any other comments, Deborah or Jessica? Any other things you'd like to say before we might just close the webinar a little early?
I just would add on the parent-centered data collection that we really invite you to and recommend that you take these charts and tables and pop your own data in and use it as a way to share your outcomes and your impact with your families and with other partners. And so you can actually just download this is a PowerPoint presentation. It's not in a PDF, and you'll be able to maneuver in it in order to put your own data in the slides. And I really encourage you to do that.
There is a question around the data collection from Bev McCartney. She asked, Deborah, will we receive the data collection in any other format? And she actually said, answered as I wrote. She wrote it.
So typically after we do the analysis and provide you with this presentation, we will be able to generate some, essentially we do one-pagers on the data that you can, again, that you can share in terms of the national perspective, but that you can also adapt and use in your state and community level conversations.
And then another question, or more of a comment, is so the data spec of survey questions are tools that parent centers can use but do not have to. And that's correct. There's nobody compelling anybody to use these survey questions. We just heard from a lot of parent centers that sometimes they wanted other survey questions other than the data that they had to collect, and they were looking for, or might be some questions and some ideas. This is simply to generate ideas for you and to think through if you want to add additional questions. Or especially as Jessica was talking about the pre and post, if you're thinking of starting to do pre and post kinds of questions for trainings, this can provide good ideas for you.
Right, and this is a public-facing website, and again, I think it's so important for us to remind our partners and collaborators about the knowledge and experience and expertise of parent centers, and so it may be that it may be useful for you in terms of your work in your state or in your community where you're working with other funders or other organizations who are trying to figure out ways to collect information from parents about how their services are and their programs are helpful or not helpful or useful, relevant, etc. So I think I really appreciate that this was something that so many parent centers worked on, and that it is again a way for us to just to show the great work that we're doing and the work that we're able to do.
There is another question here, and we would the question is we would copy the questions into something like SurveyMonkey.
Yeah, the RTF file that you download would then be able to go right into SurveyMonkey or any of the other online survey programs, and you can either create the items on there or you can copy paste. So once you have the thing downloaded, you can do whatever you want with it. The RTF files are very basic Word type files without the formatting, so they're very easy to just use and bring over, or you can save it as a doc or what have you. And some of the online survey creators will allow you to upload something, but yeah, it's very versatile that way.
So we have another question about the data, so the question is, why do you think that specific learning disability is so low and autism so high for our families? since specific learning disability ability is the largest disability, or actually maybe speech language. Use the SLD.
Yeah. So Jane, that is very true. And what we have to remember is that these numbers are based on contacts, not necessarily, and so it's a duplicated count. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're serving more parents of children with autism. It could mean that, but it could also mean that that we are providing more intense interactions with parents of children with autism, because and also it may also reflect the demand that where many families of children with autism, because of there being so much information and awareness out there about, you know, what autism is, what it isn't, how that services are needed, that we may have a greater number of families or a greater percentage of families who are demanding, you know, and demanding our services and reaching out for our services. You know, we have to remember it's not that it is about the number of contacts and the intensity, and not just about the number of children or families.
And this is Carmen. I want to add something else to it too, which is these kinds of information that you have on at your own center level, which is how we got the national numbers. You might want to look at your center level and then see whether or not something looks like it may be disproportionate to the kinds of families in your state or your area, and you might want to think through, you know, for example, if you're serving so many families of children with autism and not necessarily serving other disabilities, if there might be some more targeted outreach that you have to do to those families in order to get families of children with other disabilities, more of them to come to your services. So it's worth for you to look at your numbers and investigate your own reason for why the numbers look the way they do, and see how that might influence the kinds of services you might want to provide. I have another question here. I'm not sure what the question is exactly. It says, is this how families see us? I think you might be asking about the survey questions, and those are self-report. There's another question here too. Regarding reaching out to youth, any consideration about the use of social media platforms to inform and engage youth?
So I think that's a good question, and in some ways it's related to the previous question. We don't ask parent centers to disaggregate their dissemination numbers. So we don't ask you what percentage of, or the numbers of reaches, you know, of people that you reach through social media. So we haven't really asked for that level of data. It's actually difficult to get those kind of analytics from social media. Some centers have established separate social media platforms for engaging youth, and that may be the best, you know, and because, you know, youth interest is a little bit different than, you know, the 40-year-old's interest. What's going to capture and engage them is a little bit different. So actually having a social media platform that is specifically for youth may be one strategy that each of us might consider in terms of really figuring out how are we really doing in terms of that kind of dissemination strategy. Because our social media numbers are very high. We just can't break them down by age groups or any other demographics.
Okay. I think that's the only other questions I see. I don't know, Deborah or Jessica, if you see any other questions here in the question box. So we're at 3:58. Excuse me, everyone. We're at 3:58, so I think we're going to close off the call. And again, thank you for all the work that you all do to serve parents and children with disabilities. Thank you, Debra and Jessica, for pointing out a new resource on the SIPR website and our data, what that looks like for the last year. And as you know, our next call will be in June in approximately 3 months. It's usually the third Thursday. This one had to be the second Thursday for other reasons, but it's usually the third Thursday of the month, and we will send that information for how you can register for the next quarterly call. And I also very much look forward to seeing most of you at the Leadership Conference in July here in Washington in Arlington. So with that, thanks again, and take care. Bye.